Welcome to the first of the Science Conversations at NTNU. Today, we'll be talking about how to build and lead strong research groups. But first, our Pro-Rector for Research, Tor Grande, would like to say a few words. Welcome, Tor.
Welcome to the first webinar in the Science Conversation NTNU series. Rewarding careers for our scientific staff are vital to the quality of research at NTNU. NTNU have a wealth of experience in building research careers in a wide variety of academic environments. And we believe that sharing the experience will be highly useful and fruitful. Sharing best practice is why we are launching the webinar series Science Conversation at NTNU, where the purpose is to share experience and contribute with advice and ideas across the communities. Key to research career development include participation in well-functioning research groups, skills in PhD supervision, the ability to write research proposals and build a project portfolio, as well as academic independence. There are also the 4 topics covered in the 4 different webinars this spring, where we'll discuss the topics with researchers at NTNU. I hope that you participate actively by asking questions to the panel and by taking discussions back to your research environment. We are looking forward to good discussions every Thursday from now and until 17th of June, where our facilitator, Pernille Feiberg, will guide the discussion. Pernille is Head of Communication for NTNU Digital and have a long experience in helping researchers with communication of research. Back to you, Pernille.
Thank you, Tor. In a research career, a strong research group is a key to success. It's hard, if not even impossible, to succeed alone. So, and that goes whether you're a part of the group or you're leading the group. So strong research groups are very important tools for us to achieve high impact research and to really make a difference. But a research group can be very many things. There are many definitions. It can be a unit with one person supervising a PhD candidate, all to Center of Excellence. So many varieties. And today we have 3 professors from NTNU with us, and they are from very different research areas and very different research group structures. They will share their thoughts and experiences. We have Barbara van Loen, Terje Londal, and Marianne Einarsrud. Barbara, let's start with you. Please tell us about your area of research and the research group that you lead.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Pernille, for having me here today. And I think I'm a relatively young research group leader. I'm in last year of the Onsager Fellowship, and I'm a level 5 research group leader. So that means that my research group is embedded at the Laboratory Center unit within ICOM at the medical faculty. And with medical faculty, my main field is life sciences.
And what defines a strong research group for you?
When I think about strong research groups, I think about a strong common goal. It's a common attractive vision that it's easy to recognize that with a high value. It's also a very defined and strong leadership, and it's also a good work environment, stimulatory work environment where people like to go to.
And what about your group? Do you have like one common goal that you're working towards?
Yes, so the things that excite us best are the mechanisms within the cells and organisms that are used to respond to damage, either environmental or the molecules that are produced within the body. And we are curious first about to identify which are those mechanisms, and then what is the meaning of those mechanisms, both for health and then later for disease.
And can you say something about what is important to you as a research group leader?
So when I'm thinking about the important aspects of the research groups, it's I like to think like 4 pillars are required to build these groups. One of them is definitely the environment, the culture in the group, that people feel good being part of the group. Also that there is a sharing of the knowledge as well as of the practical skills, which are key to the type of experiments that we are doing, sharing of the infrastructure. And then besides the environment, I think leadership is important. It's important to be able to convey the vision clearly to the people, to be aware what the vision is to myself, and also how to structure people to contribute to that. But then there are 2 other important aspects. One is network, because one cannot be a lonely island. And I think with all of that, it's also important to be aware of the group size, because this determines a lot the other parts of the pillars.
So you said culture and network and leadership and group size. That were some of the things that you mentioned.
Yes.
And we'll get back to that or to some of those a bit later. Marianne, you lead a much larger group, don't you? Tell us a bit about it.
Yes, that's correct, Pernille, and thanks for letting me be a part of this panel today. So I have been building a group over the last 25 years together with colleagues, and we are working in material science and engineering. And we are actually a formal unit on level 4 at our department. So the group that I'm leading is much larger than the group that Barbara is leading. So we are 10 scientific staff members. And all together with the master students, we are about 70 persons.
And what is your overall goal?
The overall scientific goal, that's to develop functional materials for a sustainable world. But we also have the goal to develop a culture within the group where we are sharing the scientific knowledge, and we have a scientific collaboration. And we are also sharing infrastructure, ideas, network, and so on, to be able to facilitate high impact research.
And can you tell us about some of the things that you feel like are really important for you as a leader to build and maintain this group?
Yeah, that's actually kind of similar to what Barbara also said. The leadership, of course, but it's also to, since the group is such big, to develop meeting places for the members of the group, where we can meet in different kinds of meetings. Mentoring is also a very important part of being the group leader, to mentor the young people. And it's also important to follow up, and so each individual in the group can have their own kind of career, and to build CV for everyone in the group. In addition, we also have a strong focus on quality assessment, like for instance for applications. So we have a system to assess them before they are sent, for instance, to the Research Council. And at the last, I can also mention the group identity. I think that's also something Barbara mentioned, but that's important. I'm proud because I'm a member of this group.
So group identity and meeting places and mentoring and quality and careers are some of the points mentioned there. And Terje, we're curious to hear about your group, because you have done it in a different way. You have reached outside of NTNU.
Yes, we have established a cross-institutional national group between NTNU and UiT, the Arctic University of Norway in Tromsø. And that's something we started out doing 7 years ago. And the reason was that we saw that we were 2 groups that had complementary and overlapping skills. And we thought that we would be stronger together. And there was a lot of joint interest in working together. So we started playing with the idea of creating a joint research group. At the time, we were around 20 people, mostly permanent members of staff, so 10 roughly from each place. And today, the group that I'm now co-directing with, Marit Vestergaard in Tromsø, counts 60 people, where half of them are permanent members of staff and the others are PhDs and postdocs. Which is a very exciting development from a very small, I mean, when we look at the pictures from the gatherings that we've had, we were very small in the beginning, and now we can hardly fit into one picture. So that's been very exciting.
But so what's the field of research you're into?
So we're doing research on language, and we're specifically interested in trying to figure out what the building blocks of human grammars are, especially in those individuals who know multiple languages. So how would knowledge from one language influence the other language and so on? So we're looking at bilingual and multilingual kids, how they acquire it. We look at how we use it as adults, and we also look at what old people do when they, say, lose one of the languages. So specifically, we've done a lot of work on Norwegian Americans, so people who moved to the US many, many years ago, but still retained their language, and we want to look at the grammar, what's happening during that time. So the goal is really to figure out how to develop models to characterize these speakers who know multiple languages.
So, but you say the group is quite big. How is it, like within your field of research, internationally? Is this a big group, a small group?
I think it's even, at least on a European scale, it's a very big group because there's a long tradition of the one professor working for herself or himself, and that's sort of been the main tradition. And research groups have started to become more common, but they're usually small. So I think we're really quite big in compared to others, and I guess we're comparable to many other center of excellences in many countries. And you need that kind of external funding. What's really nice with us is that we become this big hub for many smaller projects, many small research council projects and other kind of funding, European level funding. So we're bringing everyone together under one umbrella in a sense, because we all share the same overall goals and we want to get to the same place.
So what are some of the main aspects for you as a leader to build the group?
Well, I think it overlaps heavily with what we've heard from both Barbara and Marianne so far. It has to do with identity. And for us, maybe that has been even more important because we've been in two different locations and we are in two different locations. So you have to maintain a local identity in some sense, and you also have to build the trans-institutional identity. And I think the latter has been the hardest, but that's also what we started out doing. So we focused on that when we created the group, and we spent a lot of time thinking about how to do this and how to ensure that there is this identity. Another aspect which for us has been important has been networking, both nationally and internationally, because Norway has been a rather strong country when it comes to linguistics research. So it's not the case that just because you have a big group, you get a lot of attention. We wanted to make sure that we had a lot of impact, both nationally and internationally. And one thing we did and still do is that we've used adjunct professorships, or professor twos as they're called in Norway, quite strategically to attract complementary skills, to attract senior capacity, who can serve as mentors and help us build the group. So that's the networking is the second one. And then lastly, which overlaps very much with what Marianne said, we think of the development of the group, how to develop the CVs of each individual, and how can we as group leaders ensure that everyone gets the best development within the group. And that's tricky when you have 60 people to think about, but we try to divide the tasks between the two institutions and so on. And we have a yearly retreat where we think about this and we talk about it, so we try to find ways of doing it together.
So what I hear, like there are topics like identity and network and the building of careers within a group. That's very similar. So apparently there are, in spite of the group's sizes and structures being quite different, there are some really fundamentals there when it comes to building groups. So we talked about how strong research groups are important to build strong structures and reach goals and achieve high impact research. Barbara, what are some of the most important priorities and decisions you make as a leader to make that happen?
I think there is a lot to say to that, but if I try to be critical and identify maybe some of the key parts, to me at least, I think one needs to be very honest about this big common goal that both Terje and Marianne were mentioning. Is this really the big goal? Is it going to be the big goal when we are publishing it? So I think it's very important to continuously examine the main aim and the main focus, and to make sure that we are at the forefront and that we are asking the most important and relevant questions. But I think it's equally important to recognize the talent within the group members and to try to stimulate it, and to make sure that people can contribute to the goal that we have. And equally also then through that to educate the young members of the group, and as Marianne and Terje were mentioning as well, to then help to build those CVs and educate the young researchers for the future.
So Marianne, is this something you recognize with a bigger group, or is it different?
It's definitively something that I recognize. This training and mentoring of young people, and also this research goal. For us being such a huge research group, of course there are several goals, but we also have this overall umbrella kind of with the development of sustainable functional materials. So we have something in common, yeah.
I would like to ask Marianne a question.
Of course.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
So thinking as a young group leader or of the smaller unit, and I really admire the work that you have done and how you have structured your unit and so on. What do you think are the key steps that a young researcher needs to think about when thinking about transitioning into established scientist career?
That's a very good question, Barbara. And I think it's not the kind of step change, but it's a gradual change, of course. And I think international visibility is one important key here. And with respect to international visibility, the network that you mentioned, that's very important, because the network can help you here. We can invite you to give lectures at conferences, can invite your students, exchange of students and PhD candidates. You can go on a research stay, and you can also invite them to come to your group. And making you internationally visible, more visible. Of course, the recruitment of excellent people to come to your group will be facilitated. So I think that's really important. And several of the excellent recruitments we have made in our group, that's coming through the network. So to maintain a network and to increase the visibility is very important. And I also think that we have been talking about these great goals and what we want to achieve. And I think that to develop these goals and to find the bright ideas, it's developed best in interaction with other researchers. So that's also where the international network comes in. And I think also talking to people from other disciplines is important, and there you also can find and make great ideas. So mobility, talking to people, that's one of the best advices I can give, at least.
Thanks a lot.
So Terje, what about the priorities you do? Which of them do you feel really impacts the research quality that you can do as a group?
I think the use of these Professor Twos has been quite important in that regard, because it has contributed to bringing people to Norway who have worked with us locally and jointly, and then bringing their network along and bringing their projects along, which has, I think, especially in the beginning, that was really really important. But then I also think that we talk a lot about these things. So we've used retreats to talk about priorities. What is important for us to do now? For instance, should we publish fewer papers? So what is the relationship between having high impact papers and having many papers? And there are a lot of incentives these days to publish many papers, and younger researchers need more papers, whereas senior researchers might not need as many and would like to have better ones and you know, fewer ones. So we talk about that balance and we think about it, and there's not a given answer. So we keep talking about it, and we have made a sort of a goal that we want to publish more high impact papers, but we have to do that in a way that doesn't harm the younger scholars who need a CV with more papers on it in some sense. Another thing that we've talked about is, and we've done quite a lot of work on, is outreach. So how do you communicate your science to the public? And since many people in Norway care about language and they're interested in language, that's sort of an easy thing to do. But we have a lot of scientific advice that we can provide, and we can talk about many of the things that people wonder about. So for example, is it dangerous to learn multiple languages when you're a child? Do you get confused or not? And the answer is that you don't get confused, and that there's lots of science showing that you actually get better at many things if you know multiple languages. But things like that, you can, you know, go around to various municipalities and talk to ordinary, you know, regular people about this, and they're very interested. So we wanted to do that as well. And then I think we also did and still do a lot of the things that Marianne talked about when it comes to grants. So we read each other's grants, we present them at the retreats, and we talk about them, and we involve each other in many of the grants. So people are often in part of 2 or 3 grants at the same time, and that sort of also brings the group together in many different venues.
But as a leader, there are priorities to make and there are decisions. Sometimes I hear you say that you're discussing it a lot in your group, but sometimes I guess you just have to say, this is the decision, this is the way we'll go. Do you have to be sort of the bad guy when you're a group leader?
Sometimes you do, I think. And I think something we had to do quite early was that we had to limit the scope of the group, because there was a lot of interest in what we were doing eventually, and many people wanted to be part of it. And people who did good work, interesting work, but not really, you know, hitting the target of what we wanted to do. So then we had to say no to people who wanted to be part of it. We had to say that this group works on this issue only. And that was a bit challenging. And I don't think, you know, some people didn't like us for doing that. And we became, you know, it got talked about that we were so strict about who we wanted to include. But it wasn't really about personalities. It was really about the scope of the scientific goals. So sometimes you have to be a bad guy. Sometimes people apply for positions, they don't get them within the group, and that can lead to, you know, not a bad atmosphere, but things that you as a group leader will have to talk to them about and deal with. So yeah, there will be times where you have to be the bad guy, but that sort of comes with the job, and I think it's important to do it as well.
So communication is a big part of being a leader. And Barbara, you mentioned in the beginning that having a common goal is important, is a mark of a strong research group. But how do you actually make people follow your goal, especially as a young researcher?
I hope I won't too much sidetrack with this, but if the movie is fantastic, it won't be difficult to convince many people that the movie is fantastic. And I think it's similar with the research idea. Once when the research idea hits the note, it's very easy to recognize it yourself, and it's also not so difficult to convince the others about it, because it's just very obvious. But at the same time, I think especially as a young researcher, one needs to be realistic about the question at the same time, and it has to be equally obvious that we as a maybe small group can address the question that is out there. So it has to be clear what are the milestones, what is the strategy, and then once when this is in place, people will want to join and participate and be part of it, I feel.
But so there are, I guess there are, as you briefly mentioned, it's different when you are a young researcher compared to when you are a more experienced researcher. Marianne, do you have any thoughts on that? How do you? Is it different? How do you make people follow your goal? How does that change along the way?
Yes, it has changed quite a lot because when we established a group, 25, 30 years ago, we were 3 young professors at that time that decided to collaborate. and with the philosophy that 1 + 1 is 3 and not 2, to gain more. And of course, we knew each other well, so we had a very flat leadership structure. But when the group now has been growing, it's more and more important to have a focused leadership. And I think one of the priorities when this group has been growing, that's recruitment. And of course, we want to recruit people with an excellent CV, because we would like to do high impact research. But it's also very important to look at the person and check if the person can kind of adopt the same philosophy and would like to be a person that's able to collaborate and share ideas with others. So it's a strong CV is excellent, but also you need other skills to be recruited into the group.
And you mentioned in the beginning that it was important for the group to create sort of meeting places. And we have a question from the audience regarding group meetings. Perhaps you could answer that, Marianne.
Yes.
I'll read the question here. My colleagues describe different structures and frequency of meetings in their research groups. Some have meetings and some have weekly meetings and some have it once per semester. My own research groups have seldom meetings, and the content is influenced by that. We have around the table where everyone say what they've done since the last time, but we rarely have an academic or thematic discussion. How often do you recommend that the research group should meet? And is there any demands or recommendations for the content of the group meetings?
Yeah, that's a very interesting and broad question. And there is probably no single rule for each group, but I can highly recommend to have group meetings. And I would actually recommend to have weekly meetings in the group. And but it will take time to kind of develop a culture for these meetings, because I can be honest, we actually struggle to do this ourselves. And it's very important to have a group culture that everyone feels comfortable being there, and everyone should trust the other people being there. So it's important to have a pleasant atmosphere. You should feel at home kind of coming to the meetings, and that you trust others. And what to include in these group meetings? We have tried several things, and you could have follow-up of each individual's research project. You could have persons that are really struggling to proceed with their research. They have come to a kind of dead end and they don't know what to do further. So that can be discussed in the group. We can also have presentations, young PhD candidates that would like to present at an international conference. So they can give a trial presentation in the group meeting. You feel at home there, so it's nice to do that. And then you are confident going to the international conference. Master students could be trained in doing presentations. And I think it's important in such groups that kind of all members of the group are present, from the professors to the master students. And we can all learn from each other. So I think that's my recommendation. But of course, it will be very different for different groups as well.
So networks have been mentioned earlier, and meetings, but the pandemic has affected our ability to meet and our ability to network. Terje, have you found any practical solutions to like the pandemic problems?
I think we've done what everyone else has done as well. We've gone online, and a lot of the things that we've done have been online. The weekly meeting, or meetings, I should say, because we have multiple, have been online, and we have invited. I mean, so that's the downside, that people haven't seen each other so much in the corridors. But on the other hand, the department has in Trondheim made a decision quite early on to let all PhDs and postdocs use their offices. So they have been able to be there throughout the pandemic. So permanent staff has had to stay at home, whereas they can be there. And I think that has been quite crucial for their sense of belonging. But obviously the rest of us couldn't be part of any physical meetings, and they haven't, so we did those online. But a positive consequence, I guess, is that it's been easier to get guest lecturers. We've been able to invite more people into the group to attend online meetings. We now can attend more online meetings in Tromsø and vice versa. And that was always a challenge before the pandemic. How do we ensure that we have access to sufficient video equipment to do this? And it was always a burden to do it. We always talked about it. We wanted to do more of it, but the technical aspect of it was burdensome. But I think now that everyone knows Zoom and Teams and all these things much better, it's so easy to do it that even if you have hybrid meetings now, it's still much easier for the rest to follow along. So there have been some upsides to this, even if the overall picture has been rather dreadful.
Thank you, Terje. So we have a question from the audience. How do you build culture and identity during Corona when you can't meet physically? And your answer addresses that, Terje. But Barbara, do you have any thoughts on, as a leader, do you have any conscious thoughts of, okay, we need to do something extra to build the culture and group feeling now? Or is it more on a survival kind of thing?
I think a lot builds to what Terje was mentioning, in a way that I think it's important to recognize and use the best out of it and to see the potentials. So I think in comparison to previous times, we are now much more using the platforms like Teams to inform each other and to make sure that we have a clear communication about what is happening, when are people, for example, absent, which we would not be able to know because we don't maybe necessarily meet each other physically every day. But at the same time, coming back to this, use best out of it, to use it as a platform to share the information about the seminar in Cambridge, which we would not necessarily be able to see. Use it as a platform to share papers, discussion about the science, and so on. So I think scientific part becomes easier in some ways, but it's these relations that are not as easy to build digitally.
Thank you, Barbara. We have gotten a question from the audience that brings us back to the topic of young versus more established research group leaders. So Barbara, perhaps you can answer this one as well. I'll read the question. Holding a short-term or temporary position is very common for postdocs or researchers at NTNU, and the possibility of a young researcher obtaining a permanent position is very low. This makes the academic lifespan of a researcher group led by young researchers rather short, 2 to 3 years. My question is how to handle the challenge of not only to build a good team, but also to maintain it.
Yes, that is a hard question. And I think part of it I'm also facing myself at the moment with the transition between the Onsager Fellowship and the classical academia track. And I don't know if there is a golden answer to this question, but I think some of the important aspects are to try to plan as much as possible in advance, to have still a clear strategy despite the obvious potential difficulties that are coming along. To decide which are the high gain and maybe a little bit less risk experiments, for example, in our case, that are going to bring us forward and ensure the continuity. And at the same time to have equally good plan for the group, how to keep the transfer of the knowledge, keep the spirits high, keep the vision for the goal. And I think maybe the last point, which I think is equally important, is to be in a dialogue with the unit, with the environment around us, to see what are the ways forward.
And I think if I may add that one important tool where NTNU as a university, I mean, we can all do better, is to use career development plans more systematically. Because it has also often been the idea that PhDs and postdocs should they will stay in academia and they know what to do and they know how to do it. But many of us had no clue when we started. And I think using career development plans as a tool to think through these various questions and to actually put down on paper that these are my goals and this is what I will do. I think that's something that many people could benefit from, actually.
Yep.
I believe that you've all had ups and downs as leaders. And when things don't go the way you want them to, how do you move on, Terje?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think one way of thinking about it is that you have to be very excited about the overall goal that you have. So what is the scientific question that you really want to solve? What do you really want to discover? And I think that's sort of what keeps you going. And also the fact that most of the time it's fun. I think that's really important, that whatever you do, it has to be fun. If it's not fun, then you should stop doing it, because it has to be to sort of sustain yourself through this, because there will be lots of downs as well. But keeping the curiosity, keeping your energy, focusing on the fun part and the scientific dreams that you have is important. But then I also have to admit that as a group leader, I feel a responsibility for the group as a whole. So I know that what I do will impact a lot of people, and I think about that, and I try to do my best to also sustain them. So another motivation to keep going is that if you don't keep going, it will have a negative impact on quite a few young people, and the young people are the future, not those of us who have sort of passed that period.
That brings us to a question we've got from the audience. That's from a team member perspective, and I'll read the question here. Do you have any suggestions on how to survive as a team member in a team that is not well organized by the leader? Several team members have tried to talk with the leader several times. Unfortunately, the leader has a strong head and believes that the leading of this team has no problem. The leader also argues that it's the team members' problem and that they should change their behaviors. Therefore, the communication is never successful. Several unhappy discussions have happened. Marianne, do you have an advice on this?
I think that's a very important question, and there unfortunately might be other team members that are experiencing the same. So I will try to give my best advice. And the principle at NTNU, that's to solve such challenges at the lowest possible level. So you should first try to solve it within the group. In this special case you are referring to there, Pernille, I think they have already tried. And if not successful in solving the challenges and go forward within the group, I advise to contact the leader on the level above. There's also the safety representative at each department. That's the person it's possible to contact and talk to. But I can also add that at the NTNU level, we have NTNU HSE section, and they can be involved in solving such challenges, and they have the experience, knowledge, everything, that so they can help to work out a safe and good working environment for everyone. And within the NTNU HSE section, there's also this occupational health services, and they have professional people with the duty of confidence. So that's also people that's possible to talk to. And I think the team member here is doing the right thing, asking the questions and trying to find a solution. Because the sooner you find a solution, the better it will be in such a case.
Thank you, Marianne. I would quickly like to pick up on something you mentioned in the beginning, Marianne. You said that as a leader, you need to think about the building of individual careers in a research group. Can you say something quickly on that?
Yeah, especially during the last years now, when the group has been growing and the new associate professor has come into the group, it's to give advice about how to build a career. So that's actually on the level above the level where we find Barbara, for instance. Mentoring these young coming stars about how to apply for application for money, which institutional responsibilities should they focus on. You should not focus on everything. You should select something that give you the most benefit and where you can learn the most and have the most powerful influence on how NTNU will develop. And I think that's very important. And for me, it's very nice to do this because I can share my own experience and bring that further to young people. And within the group, of course, I also have to do this with my own PhDs and postdocs that I'm supervising, but on slightly different level. And I think we always have to ask the question, how can we support and help this young person to develop his or her own individual career, either within NTNU in the future or outside NTNU in the future, could be in the industry or research institute or going abroad or whatever.
Thank you. So, but what about you, Terje? How do you work with career developments in your group when it's cross-institutional?
Well, I think the co-directorship is quite important in that sense because it's impossible to be in both places at the same time, and even if we attend online meetings, it's not the same. So so I think there the local meetings are quite important, and we have lots of one-on-one meetings as well, where we talk about what are their plans, what are their goals, how will they want to achieve them, and we also do that for the associate professors. What are their plans for promotion? How are they going to get there? What are the important steps? What can we as a group do to help them? What can the department do to help them? So I think it's all about creating arenas for talking about this, and then finding means to realize the goals that you agree on.
Thank you. We have a question from the audience. Perhaps, Barbara, you could answer. How do you start to build a network as a new group leader?
I think that goes somewhat way back, or it can go somewhat way back during the PhD period, for example, where mentorship of your supervisor is very important to share the network that has already been built. And I think that is the seed or pre-seed for forming your own network. And then also from my own experience, and that builds up a little bit to what Terje and Marianne have been saying. I was lucky to be part of the Onsager and STAR program here at NTNU, and that was a great help to get both national and international mentors that have been a great help both in planning the career, but at the same time sharing their own network and the experiences within that. So I think the network is somewhat passed on, but then expanded forward, I would say. And that's why it's important also to educate the young students at all levels, at master, PhDs, and so on, because they are kind of outreach of your own network as well. Yeah.
Thank you. We are reaching the end, so do you have some like take-home messages or advice for researchers in the beginning of their careers?
I think one of them is that there is no right or wrong. There are many different ways how one can build a strong research group, and many ways to roam. It can be influenced with many different things. It can be influenced with a discipline, with a stage of career, but it can also be influenced with who are the members of the group, what are the personalities that are composing the group. So I think it's a very dynamic process. But as Terje said, it's important to have fun doing it and to enjoy it. I learned that in Rosenborg they have a saying, play each other well. And I think it's important to be respectful, but also at the same time to learn from this process and to build yourself up and grow as a leader.
Thank you. So, as we've heard today, when it comes to building and maintaining a strong research group, there's not one answer that fits all. There are different ways of working and different approaches. It's a lot of hard work, but also fun. So, if you want to learn more, there are courses for both young and more experienced research groups leaders. You will find information on that on the Science Conversations at NTNU webpage. The next Science Conversations at NTNU is in 2 weeks, May 20, the same time. We will talk about the supervisor's role in PhD education, and I hope to see you all there. And perhaps you think that we've touched upon some important aspects today that we didn't dive enough into. You could also suggest topics for coming Science Conversations at NTNU at the webpage. And in the meantime, keep the conversations going. Share your knowledge, be curious. As you saw from this example, there are so many people willing to share their experiences out there. So go out there and start the conversations, and it will be good for all of us. And I would like to thank you very much, Barbara, Terje, and Marianne, for joining us here today. And thanks to all of you sending in questions and watching us. Thank you.